Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back. We are here with a special guest on the Frequency Labyrinth podcast. One of my fellow practitioner buddies from Celtic Shamanism training, Cassie Mendez. Thank you for joining me today. This is going to be an exciting conversation.
I appreciate that reaching out.
And as always, if you've been a longtime listener, I always forget about the bio, and I always have my guest introduce themselves. So, Cassie, why don't you take that away?
Sure. So my name is Cassie Mendez, and I'm a shamanic healer and owner of the Spirit Within. And, I help people sort of navigate and understand their emotional landscape and really begin to partner with it on their, healing path as a friend on their healing path and a way to, direct their healing, really. And but before that, I was a oncology nurse for about 18 years. And I feel like, especially having a healthcare background, I really see the different aspects of people in that sort of crisis moment and navigating healing on a physical level. But there's so many deeper emotional levels that go with it. And I feel like the current healthcare system just sort of pushes that to the side. So that's kind of what, brought me on this sort of course of, treating body, mind, and spirit all in one.
So, when you started down your shamanic training journey, did you start with Celtic shamanism, or did you start in a different, I don't know, vertical is what I'll call it? Genre,
Well,
yeah.
So my history in just holistic healing actually goes a little bit further back. So I have my master's degree in acupuncture and oriental medicine, which I got back in, my 20s. So back in, I think I graduated in 2011. And didn't really utilize it in a professional manner. Went into oncology nursing kind of, with at that point. And I didn't really get into shamanism until I would say midway in my 30s. I was introduced to, I think it's like a Peruvian sort of, that sort of type of shamanic healing. And I didn't do anything with it at that time. But about 6 years after that, I sort of felt the pull to look into training. And that's the kind of shamanic healing that I started training in. And I realized shortly into it that it didn't really feel like the right fit for me, but I didn't really know what was. And, a sequence of synchronicities and events, I somehow found Rhonda, the teacher that we both trained with, and ended up doing a sort of one-to-one coaching with her. And when I went to do that, she invited me to the training. So that's what really got my introduction to Celtic shamanism, because I didn't know much about shamanism before that and the different, varieties and everything. So
Yeah, I started with a South American practice too, and much like yourself, it just didn't the core principles, like, I resonated with, but there was something off there for me. And so when I found Rhonda at the Center for Shamanism, because it had the Celtic and that's my lineage is Scottish and Irish. And it was like I felt like I came home to that particular framework, if you will. And yeah, so that's really a winding path.
yeah, and I think the big distinguishing factor for me was, and it could have just been that particular training. So, like I said,
Yeah,
my view is just this one training.
right.
But the difference between it that really kind of caught my attention, and I didn't really have words for it at the time, but looking back in retrospect, the first type that I tried was very like, I'm the healer, I'm healing you, and this is how I'm doing it, step by step. This is what's going to be done, and off you go. And I feel like with the Celtic shamanism, it's really about, I feel like it's more of like, I'm a guide and you're cultivating this sort of, it's like helping you to cultivate your own inner power, which is really important because, we give a lot of our power away just, unconsciously in a lot of ways. And really beginning to turn inward and cultivate that within yourself, like that's the true healing. That's where it lies. And so, I view myself more as a guide and a partner with people on that to help them begin to build and develop those skills on their own. So that was really the difference I felt between the two teachings.
That is really, that puts to words a lot of what I saw as well. And again, like you said, it could have been the particular person that was doing the training, because there's many people that are from different variations that I've seen that have, you can see two people come out of the same training and take it two entirely different ways. But I've always felt like, even before shamanism, that, and maybe because my mother worked in the medical field, not as a medical practitioner, but in that space, that ever since I was little, it was sort of impressed upon me that we have to participate in our own healing in some way, shape, or form. And giving our power away over to the medical profession, if you will, the complex, if you will, I've always approached it as, I seek your expert opinion, I take your advice, but I trust my intuition. I'm not going to outsource my intuition. And I think that right now, with everything that's going on in the world, that's one of the things that people need to be reminded of not outsourcing that, especially as we see more technologies come into play with like stuff like AI and whatnot. And I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, they're like, well, what do you think about this? Because I've got that 20 something years in tech, right? Yeah. And it's like, well, I can't outsource my intuition, and I'm going to trust that every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And with AI and everything, I think of it with tuning into your own intuition for, when I'm like doing my writing or something like that, for example. For me, it's really important that that's where it comes from, because there's something different about the quality and the nature of it when you cultivate it from within, and to me, it feels more powerful versus just typing in, this is what I want to get across. And then, then it spits something out, right, from the collective or wherever it's sourcing it from, right? And, we know that the collective right now, there's a lot of stuff going on. So if you're pulling from that, it's just the energy behind it, in my opinion, is a little bit different than if we just, even if tuning into our intuition is new, starting somewhere, that's how you build it, and that's how you create and cultivate your own power.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think I don't treat AI as like the enemy, because it's here and it's definitely something that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
But what I keep telling people is, you don't outsource your power to anything, whether that be tech, another person, anyone. It doesn't. It's all the same.
Yeah. And you mentioned like with healthcare, so my background is oncology, and I worked in the chemo infusion unit is what I did. So I administered chemo. And a lot of times in those situations, you feel at the mercy of healthcare and the doctor, your life is on the line. And so even in those situations, I feel like it's, if anybody's going through something like that, I feel it's important for them to know that even though you are maybe in a position where you need to get that chemo and stuff, there's ways to cultivate your power within that system. You could begin to do emotional healing, or, looking at the other things in your life along with going through that journey.
That brings me to a point that I had on my list, that we've talked about anxiety in, especially, I think, in the mass populace after 2020, right? Because COVID really hyped up a lot of anxiety.
Quite the time to be in healthcare, I'll tell you that.
I'm sure. And I think sometimes that there's also been therapy speak thrown out and misused a lot in especially in popular pop self-help spiritual
Mhm.
development. And anxiety has sort of been the label that a lot of people that have grabbed onto to describe just discomfort and not
Mhm.
cultivating resilience.
Right.
But as someone who has witnessed what you have in healthcare, anxiety was not abstract. It was like real,
Mhm.
right? And perhaps even life altering. And what do you think you've taken from that or those experiences and brought into the practice that you have now?
Like during that time, you mean specifically? Just anxiety.
Just through the entire experiences. I'm
Mhm.
sure COVID was definitely the peak of some of that because it was so pervasive
Yeah.
everywhere. And I don't think that we fully come back down to it's a different baseline now. It's a different
Yeah.
base.
So what kind of comes to mind initially with that is, do we kind of, or sit in this state of anxiety, or utilize it to push us maybe in a different direction? For me, I think a lot of anxiety around, not necessarily just like that time, but sort of stemming from that, was it sort of pointed me and pushed me in a different direction, right? So when I had that really stressful period of my life going on, that's really about the time that it moved me towards shamanism. So I don't know, if I hadn't gone through that, then maybe I wouldn't be here right now doing this. So it took me some time to realize that those feelings of anxiety that were, sort of going on, even though they were kind of in relation to what was going on externally, there was a lot of stuff kind of going on underneath and pushing me in a different direction, essentially. So, I think like in anxiety in my home life, I sort of saw it as this sort of like blanket layer of something where it was there and very general. But once I started to sort of go deeper beneath that, there was a lot of other things, a lot of other nuances to it. So I think in general, people can see anxiety as like a very like, it's like a general label in my mind, when really we should be like honing in on what the other root is are, right? Peeling some layers to it.
Yeah, I love a good root cause analysis. Being an old tech guy, I really let's just get in there.
We're causing it.
Go deeper. Let's go deeper. Find out what's causing this. And I think that applies across the board. I I always and again, longtime listeners will recognize this phrase. Always say that therapy gave me great coping skills. And my coaching mentor changed the way I processed information. But my spiritual practices, including shamanism as being one, have enabled me to do the integration with all of the knowledge that
Mhm.
I had taken in. And I wonder how I feel like with all the things that you have done career wise and training wise, that there's something similar there for you.
Yeah, definitely, I would say so. For me, I think like I, just a little bit about me, I guess, and my sort of healing path history. So, I grew up in a space where emotions and everything was sort of either stifled down or avoided, or you just running around trying to fix all the problems, so to speak. And so, for me, I think all of the experiences that led me sort of to here, I did, therapy was definitely gave me, like you said, those sort of coping mechanisms and stuff. And then, other avenues maybe gave me other skills. But, that sort of deep integration part, that, like you said, is sort of that connector, right? So there's not no value in those other things.
Right, exactly.
It's about bringing them together and feeling how it's gonna wanna be integrated in the way that's, like, sort of unique to you, because the way I integrate might be different than the way you integrate, or even with the same process, we might have a different experience with it and how it feels within us. the big thing for me is sort of tuning into my body. A lot of that is like connecting sort of what's going on in there. And then it sort of brings me into that intuitive aspect or that sort of deeper wisdom and connecting in with that. And I think a lot of my experiences with healthcare and all that, I witness a lot of people in these moments where maybe they don't have great coping skills or some of those other things. So you really get to see the aspects of what it's like when people don't have those, and how they respond. So it can be really eye opening and educational for myself as well.
So when a client comes to you, what are they typically looking for, do you think?
I think they come because they're usually something's stirring them up, right? There's something that is either bothering them emotionally, or there's some triggers going on in their life, or they're just not really sure what the problem is. I've had that before too. They're like, something's not flowing right, and I just don't know what it is. And, they just can't really see where it's coming from. And I think that might stem from like, if we don't take the time to really sort of begin to tune inward, then we're not necessarily going to always receive the messages of what maybe it's stemming from. Quieting down and tuning into that. But it can be difficult to do. Like, it's been difficult on my own process too, really cultivating that. So I think that's usually what people come to me for is that some clarity on their path, and then how to sort of move forward to integrate that and continue to heal that, right? On their own, like how to develop independence in that as well.
I think that one of the things that I remember during the practitioner training around you specifically was the ability to almost instantaneously relax when you were holding the space.
Oh, preferably.
Because it was such a strong the sacredness feeling was so strong, but also like you knew that there was there was also going to be change. Like there was a strength of like, I'm not here for all your crap, but I'm gonna hold this space for you. So you're gonna we're gonna work through this together, and I'm going to be here for you, but you're going to do the work. Like that there was that type of vibe, which I always appreciated. And the other thing that comes to mind is not in shamanism training, there's something called psychopump work, and it can be around dealing with death and grief and transition and whatnot. And not all practitioners can hold that space, even if they've been through the training. Some people don't want to, and don't feel called to that. And although we've not discussed it, I've always felt like that was one of your superpowers. It might have been in the background, but I always got that impression that you really had a strong skill set there, if you will.
Yeah, it's funny when you say psychopomp. I guess like the typical thinking of that might be like, entity removal or something like that. A lot of
Right.
traditions might attribute it to that. But when we're working with these sort of like past traumas or, core wounds, there's a grief that goes with that needs to be released. And to me, that's like the deep healing, that space that can be held to allow people to release that and feel that and express it. Because and in a way, I guess that's kind of like a death too, right? We're releasing that part that sort of bound us up for so long. But it can open up so many things, so many gifts. I get like a little teary eyed thinking of it, like it's just, there's so much potential, bottled up within us that we need to be willing to let it die off and release it. So to me, that's that sort of psychopomp element in a way. It's like we're psychopumping ourselves.
Right. I mean, the psychopump word I should have defined that. That means so many different things and to so many different people. But this deep grief work, I feel like falls in that category, whether it's with people, because I feel like even when you're doing that deeper work, you're in that a type of liminal space, which is what I associate with with that a little bit.
Mm.
And being in oncology, I'm sure you were in the liminal space with people transitioned as well.
Yeah.
But it there is something going there's something about going into basically that underworld type layer
Yeah.
and getting to layers that I think surprise people sometimes,
Yes.
and being able to do that, which I feel like you've got that.
That type of stuff I love. Like I just I can give you an example on my own path, if you like, with going to that underworld and like deeper understanding, right, that comes with it. So, and I might have shared this at class at one time, but my dad, we sort of had a tumultuous, relationship. He wasn't in my life a lot, and he died a few years back. He was only 62, and this was before I started my training and everything. And there was a lot of sort of unresolved feelings and grief with that, of the grief of not only losing my father, but of never having the father that I was supposed to have, right? I was supposed to have a different father. And I get really teary thinking about this because it's just such a beautiful, a couple of years after that, I finally got to the point where I was ready to dive into that underworld and witness what the reason was, the deeper meaning and the deeper reason. And what came through when I finally was opening my heart to that was that this was part of the deal. Like he was gifting me this crappy dad so that I could grow into the person that I am now. Because had I had a good father, then maybe I would have just been a little more relaxed in life and not done what I was supposed to do in my life, right? To help others or to grow myself. And so it was a gift. This whole time it was a gift wrapped in this package of a crappy father, right? And it opened my eyes to, the beauty of that. And now I connect with him all the time. Like he's almost like a partner on my path right now. And it's such a beautiful relationship. And I have that relationship with my dad that I didn't have all those other years. So to me, that's that going to the underworld. And it can be a beautiful thing.
It can be incredibly powerful and
Yeah.
healing to in astrology, they call your natal chart the natal promise. And it's like, here's your gifts, here's your
I
challenges.
love that term. I don't know much about astrology, but
It,
that's such a beautiful term.
it's like we're giving you all of this potential, and there's millions of different ways how things will go out. But you agreed to face these things in this particular incarnation. And I love that because it does help us look at some of the challenges that we've had and go, okay, what can I do with this? And I think that's very liberating at times when we can look at something that we feel like we chose this. Are you kidding me? But but the power of coming out of those wounds on the other side is not only healing for us, but often so beneficial to the collective in ways that we can't even imagine at the
I
time.
think there's not even like we're maybe seeing just a speck of that, right? Witnessing
Exactly.
a speck of that. There's so much more underneath it. I feel like, I don't know definitively, but it feels like it's so.
It's that it's that ripple effect is when you transition from this life, you will have had all of these ripples that you have absolutely no idea about, which is why I hope that people endeavor to live a more conscious, intentional life, right? Which is why some of the reason why we do this work.
It's funny. I think of this one incident that I had. I was like a late teens. I was coming back from studying abroad, and my flight, it was laid over for 24 hours. And a friend of mine, I was living in Thailand, and I was coming back home, and a friend of mine knew somebody in the stopover city and was like, "Oh, I'll get in touch with them. They'll pick you up. Then you'll have an overnight stay to go to." And she never showed up, this lady. So I was like, a teenager. I'm like crying in the airport. And it was, the people were like, "You can go sleep in the chapel." And this one lady, I didn't know her, but she was overhearing my situation, and she just bought me a sandwich. And it was, to me, like, I still remember it to this day. And what a simple little thing, right? But it has this like ripple effect through my whole life, right? So we should never underestimate like those small things too, you know?
I always say that even if you take one breath or thousands and thousands of breaths, you're still
Mhm.
going to have a ripple effect in this world in some way, shape, or form. If you, if someone's out there and they feel something is off, but they're not sure what, because so often in this space, people have a hard time finding words. Like, I know something isn't like I feel, and you can even tell I'm even having a hard time verbalizing. What do you think? What do you think a question is that they haven't asked themselves yet?
Well, like what? Okay. I feel like it would be something along the lines of, sometimes I think that we don't see things because we maybe unconsciously or consciously try to avoid them, right? It's sort of a response, one of our responses that we've maybe learned over the years. And so maybe asking a question, something along the lines of, what is it that I am not seeing in this picture? But also at the same time stating that I'm willing to see it now. And then let it go, right? Give it time because, just keep restating it. And eventually it'll come out, right? It'll realize that, like, okay, you're serious and we could come out of hiding. So to me, it would be something along those lines, right? If we
That's a good
have
one.
the intention to open up to that, it can take a little bit of time because my, inner child or whatever you want to call it is very distrusting by nature sometimes. So, if we hold the space for ourselves and pull it forward that way, I think that would be sort of the key question. I think that I would say.
That's a good one. As a recovering control freak, not fear, I would like to hear your thoughts around control and how it affects one anxiety-wise, fear-wise.
You've been talking to my spirit guide these last 2 months, kind. It's like exactly what they have been like teaching me. So I will
See, I knew we had eventually zero in on something that's like, okay, where's the nudge at? Where's the nudge at?
So for me, like, my thing the last few months has been like surrendering, right? Surrendering to the flow, surrendering to what is. And when we are like sort of in that sort of control space, how I feel it in myself is my body tightens and I start doing things that I think are gonna, fix it or resolve it faster, right? I could get this done faster than the universe can, And to relax that is when you've maybe spent your whole life in that state and not realized it, can be kind of hard. And so I think for me, I've been doing a lot of like breathing, like, you realize your breathing even is tight, right? When you're in that space of contraction and physically trying to relax. I feel like that's like the first thing that I had to realize I needed to do. And once I did that, it was about starting to relax my mental thoughts, right? And then after that, relaxing into the emotions. Yeah, for sure. I don't know if there was any parts of your question. I thought we'll go down to talking, but you tripped me up on that one. I've been caught.
You and that usually happens in these conversations. But I think surrender is so it's another one of those self-help, personal development, spiritual words. It's like, oh well, you just have to surrender. And I think that we don't acknowledge enough how difficult that can be from a practical sense.
And it's a very active process in a lot of ways.
Yes.
In my opinion,
Say more. Say more.
oh, it like, I think when you hear surrender in this like sort of spiritual sense, it's like, relax and sunbathe or something. I don't know. But it's not because, we have all of these sort of things being stirred up. We have these triggers activated, and that's where the control is, right? It's triggers, wounds, right? So it's actually an active process of utilizing what's coming up, right? Those emotions that are coming up and turning them back to self, right? We're going to use them to help see what's going on underneath because we're not just trying to control things because we just feel the need to control. There's some aspect of maybe safety or, uncertainty that's sort of deep within us that is calling for our attention and wanting us to look at it for healing and to, like we talked about with the psychotomp stuff, get down to the root and start digging our way into that. So it's very active.
It is an active process, and I think that you have to use all the tools in the toolbox. And if there's not a tool in there, go out and get some more tools. And a lot of times you need help with that.
Yeah.
And being able to ask and receive the help is important.
Yeah,
And so to the surrender.
it's about what we set the intention to, that's what we're going to do. Those tools may, find us through either, a teacher or something else or some activity or something. We see something that comes up and we're like, oh, that's what I should be doing. Or, that'll get me there. Absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, as long as I've been doing this, still hard. Still hard.
Well, we're all here to learn,
Exactly.
Nobody's perfect. None of us are perfect. And, I was having a conversation the other day with somebody else and the thing came up with, well, I've already learned that or I've already done that. But I say, don't limit yourself, right? You're limiting your own power and potential because even if you've got something down pat, there's always a deeper level that you can embody that in yourself and express things, right? So absolutely. It's an unending, task.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I've learned with one of the astrology placements is the Chiron placement, because that's your core wound. And there's always going to be another layer of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, again, liberating to know that, okay, this is what this incarnation is going to continuously be dealing with on some level, some layer. So then you can sort of release that fix mentality. And I think that's something else I would like to get your thoughts on is the fix it mentality that we have.
On the same wavelength, because I was just thinking about that, where, we are about like fixing the discomfort, right? And this goes along with surrendering. So to me, it's not necessarily a surrendering to what's going on, it's a surrendering to the fact that discomfort is going to be present in our lives and in our experience and becoming okay with discomfort, and becoming at ease with it so that we can continue to, like you said, work on those core wounds, right? Because they're going to be there. They're going to be there our whole life. That's what we're here to do. So, absolutely.
What are some practical ways that you feel like people can use to get comfortable with the discomfort?
Yeah. So for me, kind of how I do it in my own practice, I'll just share that because that's what I know best. And really setting aside some time, whether it even be just 5 minutes to sit with whatever feelings that you're going through and tuning yourself into your body. Because when we start to feel discomfort, often we might have tension or areas of pain come up that if we just go into reaction and stuff that we bypass it, right? We don't realize that we're feeling that tense. So that allows us to even just sort of slow down. Now, a lot of times we do kind of bypass it and that's fine. I'll take some time to later in the evening, like if I'm reflecting on my day, I feel like there's just as much value in bringing back that moment in a way as it is of doing it in the moment. And then with that too, I really enjoy writing. Like for me, writing is a good avenue to sort of get out if there's any like inner thoughts that want to come out or sort of intuition that wants to come out and talk to me about what's going on at a deeper level, right? So those two combined are kind of one of my main tools in my toolbox that I like to utilize to kind
I
of
really love that. Hey, if you can't catch it in the exact moment, to return to it later. I think people discount that so much.
Oh, I hear you, but it shouldn't be, right? Like, so
No.
if time isn't linear, then we can do it anytime, right? And I
Right.
think too, we can get caught in that feeling of like not enoughness, like I didn't do that at the moment. And that completely, if we just have the mindset that now is just as valuable as in the moment, then we don't even deal with that. We don't need to add shame to the mixture, right? Or any of that. So absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And I agree with you. Writing is to get it out is very cathartic. And
And you may
sometimes
surprised what comes out, right?
yes, yes, especially if you're doing like automatic writing where you just set the timer and you just let
Mhm.
it flow. And sometimes it doesn't make sense at all. And then sometimes there's like this golden nugget in there. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm still surprised at that every now and
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
You feel about divination, and do you use any tools in your practice?
Oh, I have them right here. Do you want to see?
Care to share?
Yeah. So awesome. So I use rocks. My little, it's hard to hold them up to the camera, but
Yep.
so they're my kind of divination tool. And I don't use divination as, I know some people, I think in my mind, the word divination sometimes means like reading the future, but for me, it's not. I read the spirit, right? Read the soul kind of thing. What's at hand that maybe would be most beneficial to look at, to open somebody's awareness up to. And so I use the rocks and I've just collected them over, I don't know, over the course of a few years, just as they came upon me. Actually, one of them is from Rhonda. She mailed it to me randomly. And they, for me, because I worked with them, they're my partners, these rocks are. So each one it represents a certain thing for me, whether it be, I have a heart-shaped one, which is like the heart center, essentially. And then I have a pink one, which is the emotional sort of energetic body. And then I have the white one, which is sort of the higher self intuition aspect. And then this stone right here is the sort of shadow work. And then I have the seeing eye stone. So if somebody's avoiding with something, this rock will usually tell me what direction somebody looking at, and then an action stone.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That is awesome. That's awesome. And I love the fact that I feel like and divination is not, by my definition, not fortune telling. Like
Mhm.
it's insight.
Yes.
It's messages from spirit, and it's conversation with the universe.
Mhm.
That's how I use divination tools and what I believe that true divination is. And I think that's also something that anyone can come up with practice that
I actually
works for
just
them.
taught myself. Like it was like they called to me and I just through practice, right? It's a relationship. You don't just like meet somebody and you're like, I know everything about them, you build a relationship just like people build relationships with maybe their oracle decks and stuff like that. So it's the same thing. So we converse with each other as I'm using them and then, see what comes through. So
That's exactly right. Cassie knows I love my decks.
yes, yeah.
I'm big on the decks. I have many, many of them, and we have many conversations. So, yeah. So, given the state of the world, and we are living in very chaotic times, interesting times, but also from an astrology standpoint, the last couple of years, we've got all the outer planets moving.
Mhm.
And whenever we have the outer planets move, the collective shifts. So, what we're seeing out in the world is on par for the collective shifting.
Yeah.
What message, if you had a big megaphone and the world got quiet, what would you want people to consider?
I would just say, try to as best you can, right? Tune out the distractions because that's what it is, right? Like it's taking us away from our greatest potential, which is within us, right? So we want to like turn ourselves inward and just look within, cultivate within. That's what I would say. That's like the true the true path for everybody, and as we can sort of heal that and break those little tensions up or whatever's, tightened up in us, then we get to express more of our light and our true self and really have a more joyous life, I feel. I know my life has changed, so I feel like everybody had that potential, right? And to greater and greater levels.
I think that that's what we're seeing is a lot of potential for people to address power loss in their own lives. I think we have a lot of potential for people to address soul loss in their
Yes.
lives. I think are seeing a lot of collective soul loss. And the only way to materially shift that is to, like you said, look inward. And because it's a lot easier to be distracted, it's a lot
Yes.
easier. But there is so much more joy and peace on the other side of looking inward. And that, I think that's why people like you and I are out trying to do what we're doing or doing what we're doing to give people an opportunity and help them to get to that other side of that liberation and joy and peace. Because once you're there, you look at all the distraction goes, I think you could ask some better questions. Yeah, some better questions. Your life's going to completely shift.
I agree. And, I talk about this too. I wrote something on imposter syndrome, and because one of the things that I always, had struggled with in the past is like, when you're kind of, I guess you could say, like selling something invisible, right? Like it's different than like selling ice cream at an ice cream store. Right now,
Yes.
everybody likes ice cream for the most part, but your soul, like your spirit, that's the only thing you take with you. So it is the most important thing that you can work on in this lifetime. And, if we all did that, can you imagine like the kind of world that we could live in? It would be amazing. It would be an absolutely different planet for everybody.
Because the soul recognizes the interconnectedness of everything. It knows that already. It's just returning and being able to shine that a little bit brighter. Because that's, like you said, that's why we are here
Yes.
to do that work. Absolutely. So I always ask, or at least I try to remember, brain, to ask. I sign off my podcast with remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. How do you do that?
Oh, seek the beauty in the everyday and the magic in the mundane. I think just for me, it's just in the little ways, right? I have two kids. So for me, I do that with them. I have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. And it's funny, like when I think about my childhood versus like how the experience is for them now, it's just like so magical and beautiful. And for me, I learned so much from them, even though they're 7 and 13, like they're so wise, and it's just a whole different world now. And so I get that through them, I would say. That's my beauty.
And how do you honor the seasons? And if you would like to share a ritual practice.
Oh, well, for me, I really like, I told you I have a background in Chinese herbal medicine. So there is a plant aspect of things that I really enjoy. So as things are coming into bloom or hibernation in the winter, right? That's maybe a little bit different seasonally for me, but I like to sort of connect with different plants and see what their message is, what kind of healing energy they have. And right now, all the red buds are in bloom. And for me, they hold a really special they just have a special feeling about them. They come in and then they explode with color and then they retract very quickly, right? And so it's just this like energy of like quick rapid flash of like healing. So if there's anything like I want to get through or am working on, like I can connect with that plant to assist me in that transformation. So at different stages in the seasons, I like to connect with different things that are coming and see what they have.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right, as we wrap this episode, do you have a piece of wisdom that you would like to share?
Oh gosh, I think don't be scared to go within. I know sometimes for people it can feel really intimidating, but you can do it. Like, everybody can do it. You know, you can do it. I just want to say that.
Can you tell people how to get in touch with you? And I will put links to things in the show notes
Yeah,
of it.
absolutely. So my main website is thespiritwithin.com. And, I have a blog on there. I have some free resources. I also have a TikTok channel, which is my name, Cassie Mendez, or it's at the underscore spirit underscore within. And then my YouTube channel is Wisdom by Candlelight with Cassie. And yeah, I think those are the main ways. And my website is where people can just book sessions on there as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
And to my listeners, guys know you need to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane.